In Lathe Enhancements 2021, we've seen some holder designer modifications to help us design out our holders. Improve modeling for chucks and jaws, so now we can model them into our machines, and improve part handling support for Swiss machines. Lathe solid chaining, so now we have solid chaining as an option, and we also have dynamic start and end point adjustment in the lathe that we know didn't have before. And milling operations available with router for lathe users. New custom thread tool paths. We have rope, buttress, square, and trapezoidal tool paths now that we can pick from to get the form through Mastercam, which we previously couldn't do. And here's a little bit of a testimonial of the new thread tool paths. This guy did some testing on it. And the main picture in the middle there is just showing you that you don't have to have an insert the shape of these custom threads. We can utilize, in this case, a round insert to put that form in there. So that could be pretty handy for most people doing them sorts of threads. The tool designer, now we can pick different compensation points, and we can define multiple inserts. And there's a multiple inserted head for more of a Millturn machine. And then the machine connection plane, we used to pick off the tool, but now we can pick off a plane if we want that option. Solid chuck jaws, so now we can bring in some solid models of our jaws and of our chuck, and they'll model them into our Mastercam. This is mainly going to be used if you're using full machine simulation. You can see your actual chuck and actual jaws on the screen. That's a nice one. Collet chucks and collet support, which we could never do before. Now we can put the collet chuck in our machine along with the collet that we're using from a solid model that we can import in. So very nice enhancements there. Let's go ahead and take a look at some lathe enhancements. So on the screen here, I'm just going to get rid of this tool path. I'm going to start from scratch here. And I'm going to define some stock here quick. And nothing has really changed here. Same stuff as we're always used to here. And I'm just going to make some stock from a couple points here. And one main change here for lathe is going to be chaining, as I kind of alluded to a little earlier. So if I come in here and let's just put a roughing tool path on here. If I only have a solid on the screen and no wireframe, I'll automatically get what looks to be a wireframe on here. Now this is pretty much a turn profile out of the solid model, which we never got before. If we wanted this profile, we had to draw it, or we had to take a turn profile and get it. So I can go right onto my part and I can just start chaining this. I can chain it all the way to the end. So that's kind of a nice feature there. Another change here is this dynamic start point. So I can click on that, click my arrow, and I can move this around and drop it wherever I want. So if I want to go from the green to the red there, now I moved it back. If I click on my dynamic again, I can move it all the way to the end here. So that's a nice enhancement also to be able to get that. So if I just do a quick basic tool path here. It was quick and easy. So I had a solid model on the screen, and all I had to do is really go into the tool path, and it automatically gave me that turn profile off the solid without making anything additional. So that's a nice change. Another change here, and I'll show it in lathe. There's not a whole lot to see in lathe because we don't have machine simulation on a lot of these machines, but we can define our chuck jaws. So if I come in here to our chuck jaws, we have parametric, solid entity, or chain. So if I go to solid entity, it opens up a few more options in the middle here. So now what I can do is I can go grab a file. So I can go to open a file here. And if I browse over to my file here, And these are step files. So these are step files brought in right from the manufacturer. So if I bring in a 10-inch jaw, six jaw chuck, open that up. So I have to do a little bit of calculating here, but it'll pop up my solid on the screen. Now I can just pick what I want. So I want a jaw in this case. So it pops it up on my screen here. And there's the jaw that I brought in. So I have some other options here, and it's usually a good idea to repair small faces unless there's some issues there. Optimize it. So these are just some buttons here to help fix up the solid if it's not a great solid. And align component, right now the way I brought it in is the way it's on the screen here. So I'm going to really be chucking on this bottom section with my bar, which I probably don't want. I want to flip that around. Another thing you can do is hold down your middle mouse wheel and you can move this around so you can see what's going on here. So I want to definitely change that. So I'm going to go to my align component, and it pops in my jaw, and it's going to ask me for a, let me drag it over here, select jaw or chuck jaw face. So I'm going to say that face there. And you'll see that it kind of shows me a picture in isometric view. Well, I want to flip this jaw over 180 degrees. I'm just going to grab my dynamic. I'm going to flip it over to 180 degrees. My jaw will flip around. And now when I green check, now my jaw is normal to what I wanted here, and that's how it's going to really be placed into my chuck. Other stuff here, you can kind of adjust some of these numbers if you wanted to or if you had to, but you're bringing in a solid model, and that's why we're bringing in a solid model. So there's really not a whole lot more to change here. I'm just going to grip it from stock, so in a normal setting here. And we can move these around if we want our reference points, but I want to reference from that back face, so that'll be fine for me. And if I green check out of here, and it popped up after I got out of there. I can see that I'm not on my part, so I'm going to slide that over a little bit here. And I'm going to go to my parameters, and I'm just going to say, give me an 1.5 inches. And there my jaws are on my part, and I can green check. So my jaws are from my solid model, so that's a little bit of a change there, but it's a nice change. And you know, you're not really going to see a whole lot. It doesn't do you a lot of good in lathe because you're spinning it, so you're not getting the true effect of it. So if I go into verify, I'm not going to be able to see my chuck jaws unless I have full machine simulation. I'm still going to see the same picture that you would get otherwise, but now we don't have to define this out or draw this out. So that would be one good use of it. It does give us the correct profile here, but once again, you're not going to see the 3 jaws on there. It pretty much takes that and it spins it. So kind of the same thing here. When we get to Millturn, then we'll be able to see it in full machine sim where you actually see the jaws in there. But that is one change, or a couple changes there to be aware of in lathe. Not a ton, but a couple good ones there. Next section we'll take a look at here is the Swiss enhancements for 2021. There's just a couple that I really want to talk about here. So we can sync the weight codes in multi-stream code expert, which I'll show you. And then our Polka logic for Swiss is updated. Now it all works very nice now with the few options they added in there. So let's go ahead and take a look at a file here. Drag this on over for you. And we got a Swiss setup here where I did my stock advance. I did a facing op and a finish op on this part. So I'm going to come in here, and before we do this for your machine, there's a couple things that you're going to want to update. In the files option here, let me replace my machine here quick. In our operation library here, I'm going to go and update one operation in here, and it's going to be under operation number 8 in the parameters. I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to zero out my entry point. I'm going to put none in for the retract radius. And my X tangent point, I'm just going to put at -17 thou. And I'm going to also turn off my lead in and lead out. So these are some changes you're probably going to want to make for this to work out good for you. Once you accept that, it saves to your defaults. You only have to do that once. So now that that is set up, now I can come in here and do my POCO routine. So I'm going to go up to the pick off, pull, cut off routine. And it's always pick off, cut off in a Swiss. I'm going to select my geometry. So I'm just going to go ahead and window this and selection. And I'm going to translate that geometry to my sub. I'll just get the link to the finished part from my geo. So I can select there. And my pick off Z coordinate, I can go pick a point. I'm just going to go pick the center of that for my pick off coordinate. I've selected the 118 width cutoff tool that I'll use for this, and my cutoff X coordinate will be just from stock here. So not a whole lot of change on this page. This page has pretty much stayed the same. Where the change has came in here is in the operations. If I pick the pre-position cutoff tool, that's new for Swiss in here. Now I can go and I can left click on cutoff X and cutoff Z. And what that'll do is that'll load in the correct numbers that it needs to position the cutoff tool. You used to have to make points for this and select the points. That's no longer. That's the fix in here. So now if I green check out of here, now you'll see that my pick off routine is all correct here. So now I can come in here, and here comes my sub onto position. And now it positions my cutoff tool correctly in the correct position. I'll cut that off, and my sub will go back and transfer that back out. So it's a nice change. It needed to be done, and then they knew about it. It was just something they had to get to, and they got that done. So now our pick off routine is updated and working correctly. One other thing that I want to show you here, so that's really the main change for Swiss. Now, where this is going to be changed is actually in your post. So I'm going to go ahead and grab a post here, and I'm going to show you what needs to be done. And we'll do these for you. It's just something you have to send us, and we'll get them changed for you. So let me open this up in Code Expert here, and I'm just going to show you the change. So there's not a whole lot of change you need, but you will need to do this post edit, or have us do our post edit here. See this version number up here? If I scroll into this, 0110, that is the change that needs to happen in your post. That is originally 010, and so we just need to add a 0110 to that. And that's all you need to see the changes in 2021. So we'll have to make sure that we get them post edits from you and get them updated. If you want to handle them, you can yourself if you know how to get into the post, and you can save that out. So 0110 is going to be your change. If I go ahead and post all of this out here, I'm going to show you a little bit in the Sync Manager. And we'll let the Sync Manager pop up here. And this will take a little bit of setup, but what we can do here is we can come into multi-stream. So if you're set up in here, and if you need any help setting this up, just let us know and we can help you set it up. I have a star 2 stream set up in here. And I'm going to remove this one so you can see the steps. So I'm just going to go browse and grab the file I just posted. So that's going to be POCO demo. And I'm going to browse for the other side too, since it's a 2 stream. And I'm going to hit OK. And now what that did is that gave me multi-stream. Since I had to set up correctly for multi-streams, I'm able to get 2. And now what I can do is I can align syncs. So that works now. So if I want to align my first stream to my second stream for my weight codes, now all I have to do is come up here and hit align syncs, and it aligns it. So now you see the gap here until it sees the sync codes and waits for that. So it's just a little bit, another little enhancement that you can utilize in Swiss if you're not doing any of that yet, which you couldn't until 2021. So that's a nice little one to pay attention to for our Swiss. Just a couple changes. That's all that's really going on in our Swiss. We do have the solid chaining that I showed you earlier that can work in Swiss, and it's a continuous improvement in the product. So I continue to improve the product to make it a good product. So definitely check that out if you're a Swiss user. Next section we'll take a look at is lathe Millturn chucking components. And kind of what I'm talking about here is now we have the ability to import in any solid models of any of our fixturing that we're going to be mounting. As far as chucks and collet chucks and any of the collets that you guys use. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. I'm going to walk through how to do it and kind of what you get in 2021 Mastercam with this. So here I have a Mastercam file up. And before I get there, I'm actually going to go into the component library. So I'll drag that on over here. So you can open these standalone, or every time you launch a Millturn machine, it's going to obviously pop up your code expert here. On the right-hand side here, there is a components library here. And we're going to be looking, we're in a metric file, so I'm just going to do this in metric here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to find this, I'm going to double click on it. And this is going to open another instance of Mastercam. It's opening on the other screen here, so I have to drag that over. And this is going to be just our component library that it's going to open. So I have to give her a second here to open up. And I'll get it drug over here. And there it is. So we get this component library. And this holds all our chucks, our collets, any type of groups that we have loaded in here. Now in this case here, I have a chuck group, I have chuck jaws group, and then I did add in a collet chuck group and a collet group. And if you ever want to, you can always import them in through groups here on a right click. So the first one we'll take a look at here is our chuck group. What I want to do is I want to add a chuck. This one defaulted in with two 6-inch chucks, one for the left and one for the right. So I'm going to right click on chuck group. I'm going to say add chuck. And what this will do is bring me to this page. So before, we always had the parametric settings where you could define a jaw, you'd have to manually go through and do it. And it was kind of painful if you had a solid model of what you really wanted to use. So now in this drop down here, we have solid entity as an option. So I'm going to go ahead and left click on solid entity. As soon as I do that, I get these options in here that we didn't have. So we have open component model, select from a graphics window, align components, optimize, and repair small faces. So these two here are going to be for when you're bringing in a solid model, maybe it isn't a good model, maybe you can try to fix it. So them are usually good tools to use if you're bringing in a bad model. It'll try to repair them. To use this, I'm going to go over to my open component model, and this is just going to browse me into a file. Now, in this case here, I have a 10-inch 6-jaw chuck step file that I downloaded and a slim collet chuck step file that I downloaded. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pick my 10-inch jaw, 6-jaw chuck, and I'm just going to open that one. And it's going to take a second to pop up here, but what it's going to do is going to pop up that solid model on the screen. Now what this does is it's prompting us here. It says select one solid. Well, I'm doing a chuck, so I just want to select the chuck. So I'm going to hover over to chuck, left click on it, and now it's going to say select the component solid to center on the Z-axis or validate. So what that is, it's looking for the mounting surface. So if I pick this ring here, it knows that the center is going to be center of rotation, and my mounting face will be this back. So I'm just going to pick this back face here and left click on it. And you'll see that you get some arrows on the screen here. Now you can hover over them arrows if you get the wrong orientation, and you could spin this around if you wanted to. You can move the Z by our dynamic functions on the axes here. I'm happy with what I have there. And also over to the left here, what you have here is you have a defined or opposite. So that'll just flip them to that gnomon over. The Z and X would be opposite. So in this case here, I don't have to worry about that. Everything's oriented correctly. So I'm just going to green check. And now in the preview window here, I can hold down my middle mouse wheel and I can rotate these around of what I have. So here my chuck came in. And it usually will get us pretty darn close with a lot of these on the configuration down here. Sometimes you may have to change some of this. Like this only came in as 3 jaws. I got to change that to 6, and it updates it because this is a 6-jaw chuck. So it added 3 more positions for jaws. That's really all I have to change on this page. Like I said, if you ever had to change any of this, you still have right-click menus in all of these if you knew what they actually were and they didn't come in correctly. So you just want to verify that when you are doing this. I'm going to give this a new name. I'm going to say Custom Chuck for this example. It's always good to name these accordingly. There's a parameters page here. Minimum and maximum spindle speed. So now I'm going to change this 2500 is a chuck, and usually you don't want to spin them up to 10,000. They don't seem to like that. And then, you know, your jaw mounting position. So when we do plug the jaws in, you know, where are you mounting them to? You know, you'd have 3 options here: your chuck face, your channel depth, or you could manually position it. I'm just going to go to the channel depth, and I'm going to pick my jaws here coming up. Clamping distance, manual or automatic, where is it going to clamp to, and then allow through stock. So I want to definitely allow through stock on this, and that'll help me out going forward here. So I can go ahead and I can green check out of here, and I'm pretty happy with that, and it adds in a custom chuck. Now I also want to add in some custom chuck jaws. So there's a chuck jaws group here. And right now I have chuck jaws left and chuck jaws right. Them are just them basic 3 axes. Chuck jaws that come in with the chuck. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on the chuck jaws group, and I'm going to say add chuck jaws. Once again, same pages here as we're used to. We could manually define these parametrically, or we have solid entity again as our option, with exactly the same options that come in here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to open a component model again. I'm going to go back to that same model that I opened previous. And now this time I'm going to go and I'm going to grab a jaw. Now all I have to do is pick 1 jaw. So it popped it off of there. Now over on the left here, we have a pane that I'll get to, but first we have to select the chuck jaw face. So this is kind of, where is it mounting onto that chuck? Well, I want to mount it to this face here. Then I left click on that face, and now it gives me my orientation. Now we do have this so we can rotate this around dynamically. So really these jaws, I want to clamp on this top surface up here. I don't want to clamp on down here. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to flip this around 180, and I'm going to see where that gets me and see how it flips it around like that. Now we could use them, or we can use these over here as far as the Z orientation or the X orientation, and that could flip it, so defined or opposite. So I could have done them both. And I'm going to have to take a look at this and make sure I got it right, because right now I'm a little unsure if I did. So I'm going to go ahead and green check out of here, and you can see it came in wrong. Look at how I'm looking at that. So I need to spin that another 90 degrees. So I can utilize my options here, and I can use the align component function here. So now once again it's asking me to pick my face, and I was 90 degrees off, so I know that I need to move this 90. So I'm going to try this way first. It comes in like that. So now let's take a look at this, and now my jaw came in correctly. If it went the wrong way, it would have been flipped to 90 degrees opposite. I can take a look at this jaw and see if that is correct, and everything looks good there. As far as boundary definition goes, these are your spin and slices, depending on what you have. Usually a spin on something like this is the way to go. A slice, I don't see it being used a whole lot here. The summary, the total height and total width, that came in with the model, so they should be correct, but make sure you double check them just to make sure everything is correct there. The parameters here, not a ton in here. What is it, outside diameter, inside diameter? The reference point, this is the reference point of where it's going to reference the jaws to. So that one can be important if it's not in the right spot, or if you were clamping into this section here, maybe you wanted to put your reference point there. In this case here, we just want it on the outside edge, but you can always change your reference point by selecting this and going and picking it off the model here on the screen. So everything looks good here. I'm just going to come in here and I'm going to name this. I'm going to go custom jaws so we can see the difference here. And I'm going to green check. And now I have a custom chuck in here and I have custom jaws in here. Now before I move forward, I'm going to go ahead and add a collet chuck in here also. So I do have my collet chuck group, so I can right click on there, add collet chuck, and it's going to be the same exact options we just went through. So I'm going to go to solid entity, and I'm going to go ahead and pick the other file here, this collet chuck. And now it says once again, select one solid. I'm going to select the chuck, and now it wants to know where is this mounting to. So I'm going to go to this face here, and now it's orientated correctly for me. Once again, same options on the left if you need them to flip something around. So I'm going to come in here and, all of this looks to be good. If there was some changes here, once again, you'd manually have to change them if they don't come through correct. My minimum and maximum speeds are here. I'll leave that at 10 thousandths. And now it says collet mounting position. Well, now in this case, maybe I just want to mount to the chuck face. What that's going to do is just push my collet back to the face of this. So I'm just going to leave it there for now. And I'm going to rename this to custom collet chuck. So I got my custom collet chuck now added in here. Now I'm going to go to my collet group and I'm going to add a collet out of here. Same exact stuff that we just did. I'm going to go to solid entity. I'm going to go ahead and pick my same model here, but I'm going to pick the collet this time. And it comes in with all the stuff on the back. That's just kind of the way it works. And now it says, where do I want to center on the z-axis to validate? So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pick that face this time. You'll see it flips it the opposite. So I'm going to say, go the opposite direction here by my little windows over on the left, and it flips it over correct for me. And I can green check out of there. I can name this one custom collet. Once again, if I needed any changes here, I could. My parameters, it kind of shows me what it's showing here. And my point here, so if I move this over, is the correct spot. So it's the ID of that through hole and the front corner. So that looks all good. This is going to clamp on the OD. It's really nothing I have to change here. This all looks pretty good. And now I have a custom collet in here. Now below this, I don't have anything loaded. I loaded this whole machine. So for my main spindle or left spindle, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to grab my custom chuck that I made, and I'm going to drop it there. And it loads in my custom chuck. I'm also going to grab my custom jaws and put them under work holding and just drop them there. So now what I loaded in my machine here is my custom chuck and my custom jaws. Now for my right spindle, I'm going to go and grab that collet chuck and drop it there. And I'm going to grab my custom collet. I'm going to drop it there. And another thing to note, this is per machine environment. So you can add how many chucks and how many collets and whatever you use there, and they'll save with the machine and keep on going with them. So now in my defaults here, I have my custom chuck, custom jaws, my custom collet chuck, and custom collet. So when we get into the job setup, we'll see them in there. I'll go ahead and save this. Green check. Now I want to go back into here Now it's important to note now that that component library that I was just editing has a little tiny asterisk here behind the GMD. That means that file is not saved. Now if we move out of here and X out of here, we lose everything we just did. So it's important to hit the save button up there. So if I click on there, now my save button will activate, and now that asterisk is gone. I know everything is up to date. So now if I come back in here and look at this in a file and go to my job setup, now what I have in here, because I did my job setup and I reset these up, I have my 10-inch 6-jaw chuck with my hard jaws, and I got my collet chuck with a 28mm collet. Once again, you could always come in here and select a new chuck, remove the chuck out of here, and add back throughout. So I'm going to green check out of here, and let's go ahead and take a look at this in the machine simulation so we can see our new components that we added into Millturn. And I'm just going to go ahead and I will look at it here. So you're seeing that 6-jaw chuck, and over here you're seeing your collet chuck. And if I launch this out here, we'll be able to see it, our machine sim loaded into our machine correctly, so we can see everything that we should be seeing. So, and there's my 6-jaw chuck, and there is my collet sitting in there. So it's a pretty cool feature. Now we can see everything that it should be and what we're trying to reproduce. Another big thing with this is how we can edit everything. Now we can edit the through hole. That used to have to come back to us where we had to manually edit that. But now they open that up a little bit more so the end users could add and edit a lot of this stuff. So definitely take a look at it. If you're a Millturn user, you'll like these options. You can add all your stuff in there, and it works pretty well. So definitely check it out. Last thing we'll take a look at here today is the new custom thread. So now we have a way to do a lot of custom threads that I'll show you here with different leads, how many lead-ins, starts, a lot of different little options here with this. This is brand new. They have been testing it, as we've seen earlier in this webinar from the one guy that tested it and really liked it. So this is definitely can possibly fill them voids where it was something we just couldn't do previous. So let's go ahead and take a look at a file here. So I have this file up here, and this is kind of like a rope thread here that we have. So what I'm going to do is just go through the parameters of this. So up in our general toolpaths, we now have a custom thread option in here. So that's where you're going to find it. It's called custom thread. And if I come into the parameters of this cut, it's going to be a new look. Now, it's going to be on the left-hand side. It isn't going to be your standard lathe toolpath interface. We are now working out of this. So these are all of our parameter options that we'll go through. This little 3-bar here button will show you what they are. And if you want to expand that back, you just click on it. So the first one up here is tool. So we can pick a tool. We can pick one out of a library. We can create a new tool, or we can create a 3D tool. We can also edit tools out of here. So we're kind of up to date here with our dialog boxes, your tool numbers, your offset numbers, according to what you want. As far as axes combinations, where you cut it. Are you cutting in the main? Are you cutting on the sub? Are you using the upper turret, lower turret? You kind of set this up per your machine here. In this case, it's just going to be upper right is what we're going to use. This is a lot of orientation, so I can't tell you what you should use here. It's really machine dependent on how you're going to be cutting, what are you going to be using, how are you attacking this. So in this case here, our tool angle is going to be at 90 degrees. And the tool orientation on the machine is actually going to be 180 degrees because we're in a B-axis head in this machine. And then cutting direction, which direction are we cutting? Quadrant 2, you have all your options. Here's your drop downs. Quadrant 1 would be going to the main. Quadrant 3 and quadrant 4 would be for lower turret situations. So kind of a basic page here, not very difficult. It's just due to your machine specifications, how you're using it. Reference points, retract points, I don't have any here, but here's where you could set them. And then the shape type. So here, down here, we have our shape style. So we have rope, buttress, square, and trapezoidal, depending on what thread you're cutting. In this case here, this is a rope thread. You can kind of see the profile of the rope on here. Now, you can manually or parametrically go and fill these out. So if you know all of these dimensions, you can go ahead and you can fill them out. Now, if you hover over them, they will give you a hint of what they are looking for. Alternatively, you can pick a chain here, and I can kind of show you that at the end. So you could draw, one thread of your profile and pick that, and it'll fill in the dimensions for us. You can always give it a name, always helps. Thread orientation, outside or inside diameter, this is just information for Mastercam to purge out of to get the correct profile for you. Roughing motion, now these are going to be your speeds and feeds, your steps, your cut depths, and your cut direction. You're telling it, how do I want to go? Do I want to go to negative direction, a positive direction, bi-directional? This is kind of like our grooving, it kind of tells you how do you want to attack this. And then any stock to leave if you wanted to leave some stock. And then here's your finish, so you have your roughing motion, and you have your finishing motion here also. So kind of the same thing here, not a whole lot to talk about. How many number of cuts do you want? Which direction do you want to cut? Stock to leave, feed rates, spindle speeds. So just kind of a speeds and feeds page. Acceleration, clearance, automatic. We'll try to figure it out for you if you want to manually put something in there. And this is to sync the spindle with the cutting tool, so everything is aligning correctly. Any overcut, going past is controlled here with the overcut option, and then any allowances. And then start positions. I want to start at 0 and go to 36 millimeters in this case. So you just kind of fill them in. You also do have the arrows here to pick where you're starting, and then it'll just pre-fill them for you. Multi-start. So if you want multi-start threads, in this case there's 2 multi-starts on here. You can turn it on or off, and then you can just put in your information there. As number of thread starts and thread pitch, thread lead. You need to know this information. And there's quite a few other options there, first start, is it the furthest from the part or closest. So you can kind of fully control this now, which we couldn't do previous. Kind of nice. Just more options, a lot more options in this one. And then stock clearance, where you're clearing the stock to get back to the beginning. Any stock updates, anything like that will be read through here. And this last one is just a tool display. Do you want to display your tools? You can see it. In this case, I don't need to. I'm just going to green check out of here. And first, we'll take a look at it just in the back plot, so you can kind of see the motion here. So back plot's not going to do you a whole lot. You're going to see pretty much a blue line going across, and that's what we'd expect since we're not really seeing anything rotate here. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to grab all my operations, and we'll go ahead and we'll take a look at this in Machine Sim, which I already have popped up here. Now, another thing you'll notice in Millturn is it opens up into our Verify tab now, which is kind of nice. And I'm just going to go ahead and turn off my machine housing just to get to this part. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. I'm just going to start to play this here. It's just going to do a turn, come and transfer. And now it'll come across. It's going to do some roughing here. So we got a little bit of dynamic roughing going on here, which is pretty nice. And you'll see that it looks like I got a top parameter there, and there she goes. It's cutting this thread through. Now there's going to be quite a few passes on something like this. As you can imagine, you're using a button style tool to cut a custom thread, which it has to walk down that thread. It has to walk back and forth. So if I get to the end here, let's take a look at what it looks like. And it's just speeding up here for us so we can see the end product. And it does a pretty good job here. Like I said, there's been testing on this. Testing has been going well. Now, one thing you do have to be aware of, on a button tool like that, if you got that blade hanging out in the back, we have to make sure that that back side of that blade isn't going to rub when we're cutting this, depending on how deep we're getting. So there's some stuff to be aware of, but there it is. There's that thread. There's the double start we can see here, kind of an oval shape, starting 180 degrees apart. So there's the nice profile that it gave us. So we now have that ability. So, it's kind of cool. If I get rid of this and turn on just my custom thread level, like I said, you can come back into these tool paths. If you draw that out, and you can come in here and pick a chain. So I go to my chain option, I can pick this. So now I'd be able to come in here and grab the actual chain here. So come in here. And all that'll do is it'll take all that information off of that thread then that I have drawn on the screen and use that information. Now, as we noticed when we went to pick that chain, we do have a solid chaining option too, which, if you just have a solid model, you could, it'll spin that model and it'll give us the flat of that model also automatically and allow us to dynamically chain that. So that would be another option. So take a look at it. It's going to take a little bit of practice, but if you have them really weird, awkward threads like this, now we have a solution for it. So that's very nice, and we can, a lot of options in there. A little bit newer dialog box. Definitely take a look at that. Once again, Prototech training, we are open. Our training facility is open, so make sure you check out our website for upcoming training classes. That'll be www.prototech-engineering.com. 2021 installation documents. Make sure to get the latest 2021 installation documents. We make these PDFs. They're all built for you guys. We send them to you. If your IT wants them, we give them to your IT. We'll give them to whoever. So definitely contact support at prototech-engineering.com for all your documents. And as always, thank you guys for being Mastercam customers.